Hello everybody. I need to do a string change on my mandolin today, and I've seen a few people, especially beginners, when they do string changes kind of almost get panicky about the whole prospect. So today I'm going to do like the ultimate, every kind of maintenance and adjustment and cleaning and everything that I could possibly do during a string change. I'm going to do all of those during this string change, and show you how I do it. This is technique, this isn't rules, it's just kind of my preferences, but hopefully showing it to you and kind of describing how I go through it will kind of demystify it, make it a little bit less scary for people. This video is going to be pretty long because I'm doing every step, so feel free to check down into the chapters below this video to jump to a section you might be particularly interested in. So I guess first off, why do I think I need to change my strings right now? It's mostly a sound thing, honestly. Usually the biggest thing that I notice is that the wound strings, the G and the D, start sounding a bit more dull. This particular mandolin, it doesn't stand out quite as much. They still ring pretty well, but where I really hear it is in the balance between the higher strings and the lower strings. So if I just play the opens, it's not bad, but I also know these strings are also about, I don't know, a month or something old, and I've put quite a lot of miles done up into a bunch of recording with them. The other thing that I notice, or that you can use to tell when it's time to change your strings, is if the intonation starts to get really bad. Sometimes you can sit there and tune it forever and get everything just right, and then you'll still play, especially up the neck, and stuff just starts like ringing weird. The cause of that is the strings themselves, especially the uncoded strings, the A and the E, or the unwound strings, will kind of corrode at different rates in different places, and you'll get thinner spots in certain spots on the strings, and that makes it just not ring true. It really needs to be a consistent diameter to really work well. So once you start corroding and wearing some of those areas down just because of rust and polishing or corrosion, it gets thin and it doesn't ring true anymore. There's some internal modes in the strings. I won't get too nerdy with it. So that's kind of how I know how to change the strings. Another thing I'm going to do before I get carried away, because like I said, I'm going to do everything on this, including I'm going to take the bridge completely off the instrument, so that I can polish underneath, and I'm also going to show you how I adjust the intonation as well. But something to look at before you take the bridge off is to note where it is now. There's some people that go and put painter's tape kind of along the back of the feet and along the side of the feet, and just lay the tape gently on the top of the mandolin around the bridge, so that when they take it off, they can kind of set the bridge back down into those corners they made with the tape. Again, use like painter's tape, not duct tape or something like that. Use something that's made to come off, finish gently, and that's helpful. But today I'm gonna do a way that doesn't even do that, but just kind of to give a reference, so I know how to get the bridge close when I put it back on. I'm going to look on this particular mandolin, at this particular bridge. It's not going to be the same for every instrument. I'm just going to look at where the feet are compared to the little notches on the inside of the F holes here. So on the bass string side, it looks like the notch on the F hole is pretty close to the front of the bridge. And on the treble string side, it looks like the notch on the F hole is kind of aligned with the middle of the bridge. So that'll get me close. I'm trying to get this in front of the camera here. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit. So bass side, and this is kind of true for a lot of fretted instruments. Usually the treble side of the bridge or the saddle is closer to the nut than the bass side. So that kind of lean kind of makes sense. Again, though, you can't really trust that for every mandolin. Sometimes the notches are in different spots on different instruments. So you just kind of have to look at where yours is set up right now and just kind of say that's your starting spot. We'll get it closer and we'll move it around when we actually change the strings later. So yeah, don't think there's anything else to note, so we'll take stuff off here. I'll take off my tuner. I have a little Diodario clip-on tuner that I like back here. Oops. So I'll take that off. The headstock, take the strap off since I'm sitting down all day today, kind of like mandolin yoga, I guess. I'll take this off. I won't need that because I'm not standing up. And then I'll take off the Tone-Gard too. I like Tone-Gards on my mandolins. To me, they really help the sound project out. As you slide a Tone-Gard off, just be careful. The little plastic protectors around the feet sometimes actually slide across the middle of the Tone-Gard more than they slide across the instrument itself. So as you pull it off, don't pull the metal out of the tubing. Just pull the whole thing off. There you go. I'm kind of sliding it down the side, and I'm going to kind of pull it off all in one piece here. You want to make sure that you don't have metal touching your instrument. It's going to kind of spring off in a second here. There we go. And I'll make sure that the tubing is pushed down so it's covering the tips and covering around the corners of the feet as well a little bit. And then I'll set that aside. I'll leave the armrest on. That's a bit of a pain to take on and off, so I'll just leave that on right now. All right, next piece is to get the strings off. Some people clip their strings off. That just seems a bit abrupt for me, so I usually just, I'll show you how I get the strings off here. So I have a peg winder like this particular one. It's, I don't even know what it is. Music Nomad, apparently. But it's got a nice little soft area around the peg winder, and it's not too wide. I mean, it's kind of made for all instruments, but it at least fits reasonably well on a mandolin. So let's see, I'll open up my tailpiece. This tailpiece opens up like a book. A lot of them will slide off, so others don't even have a cover. I have a piece of felt inside. I'll set that aside and put it back on later. So basically, I'm just going to unwind. I'll get a little closer to the camera here. You don't need to see my face. There we go. So I'm going to unwind the strings just enough so that they come off the loops at the back of the tailpiece here. Don't want to drive those gears any more than I really need to, which I guess is probably why some people clip their strings, but you'll see it doesn't take a ton to get these strings off. I'm loosening. Oh, there we go. And I've come off the back, and that's all I need to do. And then back on this side, use a little bit of muscle, kind of get some of the twists off. And just pull the string out and set it aside. Again, don't touch metal to wood, so make sure that those metal strings are not anywhere where you're going to set your instrument. Again, loosen one up just until the loop comes out of the bottom, and then just pull it off the top. There we go. I'm going to take all the strings off. If I were not going to take the bridge off today as well, I would usually take off just the bass strings or just the treble strings. And I usually change them kind of half and half, and then clean the fingerboard out underneath. Before I take all the strings off, I'm going to loosen the other ones down just a little bit. I'm not going to take them off, but just so they don't get too tight and break or something. Don't want them popping up. There we go. Let's get the next string off here. There we go. Let's do a few at a time here. Creaking a little bit as the strings kind of slide through the grooves, especially once they get older and a little more buildup on them. They kind of get sticky sometimes in the grooves. It's another reason to change them sometimes, just to get clean strings in there running through the nut and through the bridge, and you can get some time to re-lubricate it. There you go. Need to do that one a bit more. Just give them a couple extra turns. The strings I'm using right now, and I'll show those to you in a bit, are a bit heavier gauge on the treble strings, so they're a bit harder to get out of the tuner sometimes, the tuner pegs, just because they're a bit stiffer, a little bit more like working with a piece of rebar kind of feel. Not really, but definitely stiffer, you can notice. Still not enough? Nope, I need a little more on these. Another thing that you'll kind of notice, and it's hard to show in a video on when to change strings, is as you play them, the metal itself kind of stretches out a little bit, and you can feel the strings kind of feel stiffer usually. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes people keep their strings on their instruments for years and years, and that's not really going to hurt anything necessarily. But sometimes if you feel if those strings feel stiff, they may get a little bit annoying to you. I've got a piece of felt that I put up here underneath the strings behind the nut. Oops, there goes the bridge. So I'll set that aside and make sure I put that back later. All right, so the bridge is obviously released from the top of the mandolin at this point. If yours does not release, I would talk to a friend who's a bit more experienced with mandolins. I think there's a way that you can apply heat a bit to like the top of the bridge, like with a soldering iron or something like that, but you got to be really careful. But that kind of softens things up or loosens things up enough to get it off. Once you do get it off, especially if it's sticky, you can get some wax basically and coat the foot side of the bridge, the side that touches the mandolin, so that you can make sure that it doesn't stick in the future. Before your bridge falls apart, because these two pieces aren't really connected, the saddle part of the bridge comes off the screws. Make sure you know how it's aligned. So there's definitely a bass foot and a treble foot to the bottom of the bridge, and you want to make sure that you put it back on the same way, because it's pretty finicky to fit this bottom piece of ebony to the top piece of the mandolin. So make sure you know which way it's aligned. You don't want to switch it around when you put it back. And then make sure that you can see on the saddle part of the bridge which grooves are thinner and wider, so the treble strings and the bass strings. And keep the treble side of the saddle on the treble side of the bass, and everything, you'll be happy there. A lot of bridges, I think this one used to, but I may have accidentally worn it off. The luthier will put on the bottom a B or something like that to show this side's the bass side of the bridge and this side's the treble. I don't necessarily see that at this point, but I know on this particular bridge there's a patent marking on there, and I know that's the bass side, and that faces toward the tailpiece. So that's all the alignment I really need there. So not going to do much with the bridge at this point, so I'm going to set off to the side. Best not to mess around with the screws and anything too much, especially if you're already happy with how it was playing. But we can do some adjustments later. All right, so I've got it apart. I'll close the tailpiece up. I don't need that open at the moment. Point the camera up a little bit. There we go. All right, so now I am going to polish it, and I'll show you what I use. There's a luthier at Gibson right now. His name is David Harvey, and he makes this polish called Jubilee polish. I'm going to show you what that looks like here. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll be able to find it. But I know a lot of serious mandolinists that use this polish on all sorts of instruments, new and old, even kind of more fragile pieces. It does say on there to put this on finished woods. Do you think it says somewhere to not put it on? Yeah, don't use on open cracks. So this isn't for absolutely any instrument. If you have like damage on your instrument, you have to be careful. If you have some finish checking, that should be fine. It's just more you don't want to apply the polish necessarily to bare wood. This polish does separate out a little bit. It has like an oil and some other stuff in there too, so make sure you give it a good shake before you put it onto a piece of cloth here. Doesn't matter too much if it gets a little frothy. Alright, so I'm going to open it up here. There's a plastic stopper that's, at least on my bottle, doesn't come off with the lid, so make sure you kind of pull that out too. And then you don't need much on a cloth. I do usually a couple tilts, and I'll make like 2 wet spots on my cloth. This is just an old scrap face cloth, washcloth. I think that's on. And yeah, so I'm just going to rub over everything that's wood and the fretboard too. So it's just good to get off dust and to make everything polished again. Nothing fancy, nothing incredible about this technique here. Doesn't take very long though. So obviously get the top of the mandolin because that's the part that everybody sees. When you have all the strings off, it's a lot easier to get under like the end of the fingerboard here. And you could even get under the tailpiece if you want, because there is some dust that'll build up under there. Get around under my armrest, which I've only recently started using. I think I like it, but it's not a mandatory piece of equipment by any means. Okay, and then I'll get the sides. Again, it doesn't take a lot of polish, so don't overdo it. You'll make your instrument a little bit more greasy and stuff like that. You don't really want that. Back. This is why you take the Tone-Gard off so you can get back here. There we go. Alright, and then do a little bit up around the headstock. Just be careful if you have a curly, don't break your curly off. I haven't done that yet. But now I've said it out loud, so I probably do it myself, right? Be careful, sometimes on your headstock there can be a loose piece of the winding of the strings from when you changed your strings last and you clipped off the spare ends. Sometimes when you clip off those spare ends, a loop of the winding around the bass strings kind of floats off, and it'll sit around and kind of stick somewhere around your headstock. But again, that's a piece of metal, and you don't really want to touch metal to wood if you can, because that'll just end up scratching the wood. There we go. Get the sides of the headstock, get around the back of it too a little bit. This is just the chance to get all the dust and smudges off that have kind of been building up. Okay, I'm going to get the back of the neck pretty well here. This is a spot where you actually tend to make a lot more contact with the instrument. I might put a little more polish on. There's a couple of dull spots. Oh, they're coming out. Here we go. Doesn't take too much. There's always that weird middle spot between when you first polish it and it's kind of still a little bit wet looking, and then kind of as it dries, it never seems to dry quite evenly, and so you think, oh, I didn't do it well. But really, it's just half dry. There we go. That looks a little better. Okay, now back to the neck. Yeah, the neck actually can kind of build up a bit of grunge from the sweat and stuff from your hand. I'm going to open up the cloth and use a clean part of the cloth, but it still has polish on it because it kind of soaked through, so that's handy. This little bottle of polish probably last for the rest of my life, honestly, unless I drop it, break it or something. Okay. The neck nice and smooth. Alright, and now the part that I tend to spend more time than normal on. So I spend a lot of time cleaning off my fretboard, whether or not I take all the strings off. If I don't take all the strings off, like I said, I'll take off the trebles or the basses at a time. And if I just take off the basses, say that means the bass side of the fingerboard is open, then I'll just take a cloth, it doesn't even need to be with polish, and just rub kind of parallel to the frets. So I want to clean off the wood especially, and then clean off around the edges of the frets because there can be a bunch of gunk that builds up around the sides of the frets there. And I usually tend to put a reasonable amount of pressure on the wood here, so I'm going to lay the mandolin on its back. Not as great a view for you, but this is an actual cleaning. So I kind of give it some good pressure there. Actually scrub off the stuff that kind of builds up on the fingerboard. You can see how fast I'm working down. It doesn't take huge amounts unless you haven't done it in a long time, and then you'll kind of see as you're rubbing that you can kind of see what's coming off. Once you get toward the narrower frets, you kind of have to use the tip of your finger more than the side of your thumb. Hopefully you had a good luthier at this point to finish off the ends of your frets, because if they're not finished well, they can snag up your cloth pretty badly. There we go. Usually I notice the most grunge up on the treble strings side on the fingerboard because your finger kind of reaches down through those a little bit more, your fingertip. Bass strings are a bit thicker, kind of keep your fingers separated from the wood a bit more. Something like that. Alright, well, it's a lot better. Polish the metal just a little bit here. Alright, we'll call that good on the polishing. Alright, so that's basically everything apart and everything that you don't want on the mandolin off the mandolin. It's all nice and shiny now. I'm trying to get some glare. There we go. Pretty instrument. Anywho, so now that everything's off and clean, we're going to put it back together. So I'm going to put on a set of strings I happen to be using right now. These are straight up strings. I've been liking these. These are the medium gauge ones. Talked about these in another video compared to, I think, some of the Diodario sets. Alright, so when I open these up, there's going to be a little bit of confusion for newbies. It says first, second, third, and fourth. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Well, that's a somewhat common nomenclature, especially in, especially in like the violin world. In the notation, it'll designate 1, 2, 3, 4 as basically the string number. So the E string is 1, and the A string is 2, D string is 3, G string is 4. So in order from thinnest to heaviest. And since string makers just make their strings by gauge, by like thickness, not necessarily by note, it just makes more sense for them to say 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of whatever other note your instrument might end up doing. So since I took the bridge off, I'm going to just pick out 2 strings to put back on the instrument at this point. I'm going to pick out one of the E strings, so from the first packet. I'll unwrap these loops here a little bit. Let them spring apart. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to take one of the E strings. I'm going to do the very outside string. All right, so as I loop this into the tailpiece, the big debate re-emerges. So you can see there's a lot of little cutouts here, and the question always comes up: do I need to use like these sideways cutouts here? How they would normally be used is those sideways cutouts are just for the treble strings. So I'll use the lowermost one to put this loop over, and then the outermost vertical cut is for where it just wraps around. There we go. So it wraps around like that. And the reason that these little teeth are placed like that and built like that is in older days of string manufacturing, the loop end of the string here, let's see if I can get it to focus, maybe a little better there. There's a winding, it's twisted around itself up above the loop, and there used to be trouble with those windings coming apart and the loop kind of falling apart. I haven't had a problem with that in that whole time I've played mandolin, honestly. So I really don't think it's necessary to use that extra L tooth on the tailpiece. So when I put my strings on, and again, this is just a me-ism, you can if you want, it's not going to hurt anything, but it's just more convenient, it's a little faster. I just hook the string straight up to the tooth that it would have wrapped around. So you can see there, and I'm just gonna ignore those sideways facing teeth. I'm not even gonna use them. So that's just how I've done it. I haven't had any problems with that, so your mileage may vary here. Another thing, as I start to put the strings on, I'm going to turn all my tuners so that the hole inside the tuning peg is going across the headstock. I don't want it going up and down or diagonally like that. I want it to go side to side across the headstock. So I'm going to turn all the tuners so that the holes are going across like that. And that's just a mental crutch for me. So let's see. So you can see these two tuners here. You can look down the hole. These are still pointing the wrong way. I haven't fixed those yet. So I'll go through and fix all those. That helps me later when I go to put the strings on to kind of wrap them around the post the right way. There's a lot of opinion out there about how to wrap the string around the post. I tend to do a fairly simplistic way. It doesn't take knot tying skills or anything like that. But I've never had a problem with it slipping or anything like that. Alright, so I will loop the string at the bottom again because it just fell out. And then I'm going to show you how I put the string in. So I'm going to take the end of the string and up on the headstock side, actually let me pull out a very special piece of equipment here. It's called a pillow. And just rest the mandolin on this. Alright, so it's still looped in around the tailpiece. I'm going to take this string and I'm going to feed it from inside of the headstock to outside. So on the treble side, that'll be from the fingerboard to both sides will be from the fingerboard to the outside of the instrument. So basically I'm going to stick it in right over the truss rod cover, and now the string is poking out over the tuner knob. Pull it out this way. How tight do I pull it? Tight. So just the way I do it, I take 3 fingers and I put them at the middle of the fingerboard where the 2 darts are, and I kind of pull the string tight across the top of those fingers, so it leaves a bit of slack over the fingerboard, and that's as tight as I pull it. So now next step, what do? So I've laid the string, or I've put the string through the tuner peg. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the slack, I'm going to pull it up toward the top of the instrument. I'm going to keep my fingers here because I don't want to pull the string any tighter. So I'm going to pull it up toward the top of the instrument, keep wrapping around the peg until it is parallel to the string running between the bridge and the nut, or the tailpiece and the tuner. I'm going to pass the loose end underneath the string and grab it back on the other side again. Keep wrapping it around the peg. Oops. Boing. There we go. And once I get around the peg, I'll see if I can show this here. This is a little hard to do, but hopefully you can see it. So here was the string that was pulled down. So I've pushed the string out, wrapped it over the top and around and underneath. So now it's underneath this piece here. And you can see the main part of the string that goes down over the nut is kind of coming off the inside of the post because I had pushed the loose end to the other side, or to the outside of the mandolin. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to pull kind of both pieces tight. I'm going to wrap the loose end kind of around the back side. So I've just used a ton of words and made it sound a lot more complicated, but basically I'm pulling the string up against that string, kind of making an L with it. So now I've kind of wrenched it across the side of the string that was already going through the post. And that's really all the locking I do. Now I'm just going to tighten the tuning peg. So the treble strings, to make the string tighter, you're going to roll the peg toward the bridge. The bass strings, you're going to roll the peg away from the bridge to make it tighter. So I'm just going to tighten it just a little bit here. Something like that. Okay, this is going to be pretty hard to see, but let's see if I can show it anyway. So as I wrap the string around the peg here, I want it to kind of wrap from where the hole is down. So it's going to kind of cassette from the hole down. So as I wrap around, I make sure that this loose string is feeding underneath what's already there. I want the loops as they go around the peg to stay close to each other. I don't want there to be a gap in the string as it wraps. I want them to stay close. And then the next layer is going to be right underneath here, if that makes sense. So I'm going to get it, at least so there's not too much slack here. Oh, that's a little bit too tight. Now you got to remember, I still have to put the bridge down underneath here, so I don't want it tight at all right now. I just want the string so it's not going to fall off. So that's one of the E strings, one of the 1. Now I'm going to get one of the 4th strings out, one of the G strings. Let me make sure I don't lose which string is good here. There we go. Let me toss my old strings farther off to the side. That's a good string. And now my G strings, so I just take the loops and I kind of untwist them once or twice. And then I take the pointy ends and pass that pair around once or twice, and then boing, they come apart. Alright, so G string, same kind of thing. I'm gonna hook it over the loop in the bottom. Just kind of want to fall out, so you kind of get used to kind of keeping just enough tension so it doesn't just slip back off that loop. So usually what I'll do at this point, again, I use kind of 3 fingers along the 12th fret. I'll kind of put the 3 fingers there now, and I'll hold it with my thumb. Therefore, this can be as loose as I want, but it's still holding some tension here, so it's not falling back out of the tailpiece. Okay. And again, I'm going to feed the string from inside to outside. Maybe this one will be easier to see because the string's a bit thicker. Inside to outside. Okay, I'm going to pull it a bit tight there. Okay, so now my 3 fingers are all the slack that it's holding up there. Okay, and then I'm going to take this loose end, I'm going to go over the top of the peg, all the way around, And once I get parallel, I'm going to go underneath and keep pulling it around the peg there. So now I've kind of gone all the way around the peg, and then I'm going to pull up on it. So straight up, the same parallel basically with the tuning peg itself. And that's all the lock-in I do. And usually right there it's about tight enough to basically keep it from falling out of this loop here. Don't mess around with it or it'll fall out, but it'll at least hold its own now. And then I'll start tightening up the peg. I'm going to kind of hold this loose end straight up as I go and keep a little tension on it just to keep there from being any kind of looseness inside the windings around the peg here. I'd want those to all be nestled right up along the side of the tuning post. Okay, as I tighten this, I'm going to make sure that I'm not getting stuck back here behind the nut or something like that, or around the wrong side of the bridge. Sometimes you can kind of get yourself tightened too far where you can't like bring it back around. So just get it right. And again, I'm going to make sure that, so I'll show you here. So right now this is kind of going the wrong way. So you can see the string here is kind of going around the top of whatever loop is there. I want this loop, or I want this to go around the bottom. So as I tighten it, it's going underneath the other loop that's already there. Hope you can see that. So now you can see there's a loop on the peg, and then this strand here is feeding underneath it. All right, so I've accidentally made that a little bit too tight. That's okay. We'll have plenty of time to tune it later. So I'm going to loosen it back up a little bit so I can fit the bridge back underneath. That's what I need to do now. There we go. That should be about right. All right, so the bridge placement. This isn't particularly scary. So I'm going to, hopefully your bridge hasn't come out into pieces and your screws gotten moved all over the place. But basically, at this point, to make sure the bass side of the foot is toward the bass side of the instrument. And then on the top piece, because again, these are separate pieces. Oh, here we go. There's where the T is listed on my bridge. So underneath, you can kind of see some pencil marks there. There we go. So 274, which is the serial number of my instrument, and then on the other side there's a T. So that's this is the treble side of the bass. Not sure it's quite focusing. There we go. So that's the treble side of the bottom of the bridge. And then you can tell on this piece which side is the bass side and the treble side by just how wide those slots are. The bass strings fit inside the wider slots, and then the treble strings fit inside the narrower slots. So treble side here matches with treble side here. It only goes one way. Then I'm going to lift the strings up as much as I can here. You don't want to drag the bridge over the instrument too much. I'm going to kind of float it through and then kind of stand it up underneath the strings. So notice it's not really pushing down on the mandolin, so this bridge is just kind of free to slide around. All right, so now I'm going to put the G string in the farthest G string slot and the E string up in the E string slot. And just that little bit of tension that I have is enough to hold it in place. I wouldn't bump it, but you can see right there, now the bridge is sitting on the mandolin all by itself. So, where's the right place to put it? You might see a spot that's kind of worn in from where your bridge was before, but I'll show you a way to make sure it's in a really good spot. There's a few dimensions to check. There's up and down, which is controlled by the screws on the bridge. Hopefully you haven't touched that. Hopefully your mandolin was set up well to begin with. I'm not going to mess around with that part today. If you do need to do that, that's part of a more professional process called a mandolin setup, and you'll usually a professional, at least at first, until you get comfortable doing it yourself, would adjust that height and adjust another setting underneath this piece of material here. For me, it's metal. A lot of people, it's plastic. Is another nut to control something called the truss rod, which feeds down the neck and basically controls how bent the neck is this way. That's a pretty sensitive adjustment. It's usually on the order of a thousandth of an inch, either way, good to bad. And so if you don't know what you're doing there and you don't have the right measuring equipment, I'd be really careful. Bruce Weber has written a bunch about adjusting your own truss rod, and with the instructions he's put out, I've gotten comfortable adjusting mine, but that's something that can get you in trouble. You could do some pretty serious damage if you do it wrong. So do that with instruction or have a professional do the truss rod. The height adjustment is a little easier to do on your own and easier to fix if you do something weird. But again, I'm not going to adjust that dimension today. The other two dimensions I do need to worry about, though, is where the bridge is this way, up and down the body of the mandolin, and then this way, side to side on the mandolin. Side to side should be fairly easy for you to kind of visualize. Well, let's make sure the strings are in the right spot on the nut too, so you can visualize cleanly. All right, so right now my bridge is not in a great place side to side. So you can see the G string coming down, and there's this much room on the side of the fingerboard, but the E string is coming down, and it's almost off the side of the map. So right now that means the bridge is too far that way. So basically I'm just going to take the bridge and gently pick it up and slide it a little bit more toward the middle. I'll actually face it like this so I can see kind of where it is. And basically what I'm looking for is to have equal amounts of fingerboard showing up here all the way down to here, and then an equal amount from here all the way down the outside of the G string. So I've shifted the bridge slightly, and now you can see that looks a lot more centered. So get that centered, that's a good place. I'm going to tighten the strings up actually I need to tighten the strings up to pitch now, so I can know where to put the bridge this way. So side to side, that's not going to really move anymore. So now I'm just going to be moving the bridge toward the nut or the tailpiece, and then kind of twisting it to get the intonation right. So at this point, before I tighten the strings, I'm going to make sure that the bridge is close to the right place. I don't want it way up here or something like that. Of course, I just bumped it really out of place. That's okay. So let me set it back centered like I want it. And also you want to make sure that the bridge is not tilting forward and back like that. That's really bad. You want the feet of your mandolin or your bridge flat on the top of the mandolin. It should be fitted, so that should look snug. You should be able to look down the side of the bridge and not see any air gaps. My mandolin bridge is built so that it leans slightly back on purpose. That's something that I think is a feature. So it doesn't look straight up and down, but there is no air gap under the foot on the front or the back, and that's what you really need, is no air gap on the front of the back. Anyway, make sure it's centered up and down, and then look again where your feet are compared to before you even took the strings off. So I remember the treble side was about centered, and the bass side was about with the front of the foot at the gap on the F hole. Let's see, the bridge keeps sliding around here because it's really loose. I'm just going to put a little more tension on the string so it doesn't keep slipping around quite that easily. There, so now it's got some tension. And I'll just make sure it's about where I want it here. And this is just to get it somewhat close. I'm going to adjust it much more finely in a bit. Okay. That's about right. Okay. So again, I've put the notch toward the front of the bridge up here on the G side, and then on the E side, the notch is kind of right in the middle of the bridge. Close. We'll adjust. Okay, now I'm going to get these two strings all the way up to tune. So I'm actually going to put my tuner back on. And this little guy just kind of ratchet clips up here. There we go. tune to open G and open E. Here's a G. Okay, those are both pretty close. So now, is my bridge in the right place? I've tried to use tuners in the past to help figure this out. They're not as accurate, I don't think, as just using your ear. So I'll show you the way that I do this. So some people, I've in the past done way different versions of this, but I think the most reliable and most simple way to figure out if your bridge is in the right place is to check the E harmonic. I'm going to make sure this doesn't gouge my eye out. There we go. E harmonic with that 12th fret. I actually got those two notes close together. And then I'll play a little bit of a scale up to that note. So I'm using the frets, kind of getting used to where that note sounds like it is. And then I'll play the harmonic. Okay, so now I'm hearing a mismatch. So the fretted note sounds sharper than the harmonic note. So it sounds like, that's exaggerated, but that kind of feel. Flatter, fretted, a little bit sharper. So what that means, the harmonic is going to be in tune. That's kind of how harmonics work. The harmonic is the exact halfway, basically, note of that string. The fret, in this case, since it's sharper than the harmonic, basically means the frets are doing too much, if that makes sense. So if I were to move the bridge all the way up to here, okay, don't do that. The frets would play they would make the note sharper than they're supposed to, because the scale length, which is the distance between the nut and the bridge, is too short. Okay? If the scale length is too long and I have the bridge too far back, the frets kind of don't do enough. They don't make the note sharp enough as you play up. So right now the harmonic is in tune. You trust the harmonic, but the fret is a little sharper than that, which means the fret's doing too much, which means the scale length is too close. So I need to move the bridge farther away. How much? Not much. Since we put the bridge close to where it was before, if it was approximately in tune. If it wasn't, then again, it's still not going to be very much. So I'm going to be bumping the bridge around just like a millimeter at a time, maybe even less than that. I end up using, this is probably not recommended, but this is what I do. I use my pliers. I hold the metal side, because metal against wood is bad. This side's a nice soft rubbery plastic. And what I end up doing is I kind of put the pliers here and it'll slide it along the top. Since it's rubbery plastic, it's not going to hurt anything. And I just kind of bump that foot farther away. So I'm going to bump the treble side of the bridge. I don't care about moving the bass side. I don't really want it to move, but right now I do want to move the treble side. So I'm going to bump this away and I'll show you how that looks. I'm going to kind of look, see what I'm doing here. There we go. You can kind of see it moving around with, even just as I do that. I'm not tapping very hard there. So what I've done there is I've just shifted the treble side of the bridge farther back just a little bit. So that should make the fret do less. I'm going to retune, make sure that I'm using a good reference note here. There we go. That's in tune. So now listen to the harmonic again. And then the fretted note. That sounds closer, so I'll play a little bit of a scale so I can get the notes in my head better. And then the harmonic. I think that sounds in tune. I did not move it very much. Like if you were to look at it again, you wouldn't be able to really tell a difference. It still looks like the foot of the bridge is about halfway split by that notch in the F hole here. So it's a very small adjustment. It doesn't take much. As you're adjusting the string around, or the bridge around, if you're moving the bottom of the bridge, the top of the bridge is going to kind of stick against the string. So as you're doing this, again, make sure that your bridge isn't rocking back or something like that and not making contact with the top of the mandolin. Sometimes if you bump the bottom of the bridge back, you'll have to like manually pull the top of the bridge back too to flatten it back out. I think I'm pretty good. Actually, I have a tiny bit of a gap. Oh yeah, you can see that. Okay. So I bumped the bottom of the bridge back. Gotta try to get it to focus here. There we go. So I bumped the bottom of the bridge back, but the top of the bridge stayed stuck to the string. And now you can see there's a gap of air down underneath the back of the bridge foot there. So that's a really good demo. Meanwhile, the front of it there's no air gap there. You can kind of see maybe a little bit along the side that it's tilted. So what I'm going to do there is watch this. This is a motion that I learned on violin bridges. I'm going to grab the bridge like this. I'm going to put my thumbs along the back. I'm going to basically just rotate it in place. I don't want to like shift the bridge around like this. I just want to rotate it. I'm just going to try to rotate it flat. There we go. That's all it was, but now I can feel that the bottom of the bridge is flat against the instrument again. All right, so what did I just do? So now the foot moved, but the top didn't too much. It moved a little bit, I think, but now I just scooted it even farther back, which means I just increased the scale length, right? So I probably messed up my intonation. So let's listen to that again. Oh, yep. Yeah, you can hear that. So here's the harmonic, which is in tune, and then the fretted note. So now it sounds like the fretted note is slightly flatter. We'll play some notes and see if the scale and other notes kind of put that in context a little better. Yeah, it sounds just a little flat because again, the top of the bridge, that scale length moved farther away. So now the fret isn't quite doing enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoot the treble side a little closer to the nut again, just a little bit. Do that there, and then I'm going to, at this point, check right now and make sure the bridge is flat before I sit there and say, yes, we're good again. There we go. I just moved it a tiny bit. Tune it. Okay. It still sounds a little flat to me. I'll do just a little more. Whoop, a little much. There we go. Flatten the bridge out. Yeah, it sounds like I did a little too far. Let me go back flatter. So So the reason you want to do this now with just 2 strings on is if you put all the strings on, there's a lot of pressure on the top of the mandolin. You cannot tap the bridge around lightly and actually move it, which is not something you really want to do, is push that around hard. I think that's pretty close. Okay, so now basically this half, the treble half of the bridge, is where I want it. So now I want to try to move the bass side around independently. It gets a little weird. Sometimes you move this side and that's the treble side shifts too. So I'm just going to go a little faster, you know, kind of the procedure I'm going to do. And I'm just going to mess around with it and get everything kind of balanced and shift it around until it's in the right place for me. So I'm going to stop talking and just kind of go at the speed I'd normally go. Sharp. Try to hold it in place a little bit here. Make sure as you're doing this, you're not pulling the string off to the side, bending the note, because you can make it sharper just by doing that. Listen, I'll just play a note and I'll bend it as I play it. So you can really go to town. So make sure you're pushing it straight down as you normally would and not with too much pressure. Pretty close. It's not absolutely perfect, but I think it'll be good enough for me. Make sure I didn't move the treble side here. That sounds a little flat. That sounds flat now, so I need to move that a little closer. Just pinched myself. Sounds a little sharp. So I think I'm fighting the bridge, kind of like I move one side up and the other side moves down or something like that. So sometimes you have to just be a little more careful to kind of hold one side in place and feel if it moves, and if it does, sometimes you just gotta kind of shift the bridge a little more drastically to make both sides get to where you need them at the same time. think that's good. Okay, I'm gonna call that good. Make sure, one last check, that it's centered left to right. I think I might want to bump it just slightly. No, I think that's should be okay. I'm really picky with my bridge setups here, so sorry, forgive me while I take a bit of extra time. I'm gonna bump it actually slightly to the side. I feel like it's a little too close to the E fret ends compared to how close they are on the bass side. There, that looks a little more centered. There we go. That looks better. All right, probably just throwing everything off. Yeah, not bad. Touch flat. Look at it. Yeah, I can see that. Okay. Bump it just a teeny bit. There you go. Rock it around. Make sure it's set flat straight on the top. So the two notes don't quite match, but I think overall the whole scale does. I may adjust that later, but it's really close. Most people are going to be pretty happy with where that is. All right, so I've gotten the position this way set up so the intonation is right. I've gotten the position this way set up so that the strings are centered on the fingerboard, and I haven't touched the screws as far as the up and down, how far the strings are away from the fingerboard this way, how easy it is to push down. So now that the bridge is in the right place, it's just a matter of putting the rest of the strings on. So I'll get a little closer to the camera here so you can kind of see a little bit more how I do that. Sometimes the pillow or something is nice just to kind of float the headstock up off the surface so that you can get the string winder in there. Normally I do this on some other surface and then I'll raise the neck with a pillow or something. But for recording, this was kind of the way it seemed to work out best. So again, hook at the bottom, leave 3-finger gap, feed it from inside to outside, tighten it against the top of your fingers. That's as tight as you want it there. Once you go over the top, it's going to kind of lock it into place. It's not going to really slide back and forth anymore, so I can take the fingers out and help kind of wrap it underneath. There we go. I'll lift it straight up, kind of make that L, and then twist it up. Alright, so I'm going to show you the one piece I didn't get to do on the 2 strings I've put on so far, because I was just trying to stick the bridge in place. Again, make sure you get the string knot around the back of the nut here. You gotta pull it out before you get it too tight so it can go sit in the slot it needs to. So that other step I didn't get to do on the strings that are there is lubricating. So it is a very good idea to lubricate the slot where the string goes to the nut and the slot where the string goes to the bridge with graphite. Graphite you can get in a couple different ways. The most common way that I frequently use is just a pencil. They're not made of lead anymore, they're graphite. And I use a mechanical pencil, like a 0.5 millimeter or something like that. It's usually a reasonable size to reach into all the gaps. You have to wear a 0.5 down a little bit to get into the E string slots, because those are smaller than 0.5 millimeter. But if I'm feeling particularly Gucci, I've had this tube of powdered graphite lubricant for the longest time. I've probably had this for 20 years, this same tube, and it's still probably full to there, full to there, so there's still a decent amount of powder left in here. I like this a little better if I have the time as far as how it works on the grooves, because I think pencil lead or pencil graphite really also has like binders in it, like clay or something like that, and sometimes if that's all I use for a long time, that can kind of build up and kind of get sticky on its own a little bit. But this graphite lubricant just works better as a lubricant. It's kind of what it's built for. So to use it, I will pull the string out of the groove that it actually sits in. And sorry it doesn't zoom in here, but you should be able to get the idea. I'm gonna just put a teeny little pile of graphite powder into the slots in either place, and you gotta be careful because it is just powder. You can blow it away, you can wipe it off. So once that pile is kind of in there, I'm gonna gently set the string. I'll try not to wear away the graphite before the string is at the tightened place as much as I can, so that the string and the slot both have graphite in the right place. I'm going to tip it over. Nothing's coming out yet. There we go. Now there's just a little bit of powder in that slot. Let's see if I can show it to you there. So in the inner G string slot there, you might be able to see it, you might not. They're all kind of dark slots right now because they all have graphite in them from previous string changes. Just a little hill of powder around it. And then I will gently set the string in the slot. Actually, on the nut slot, I usually hold the string up away from the nut as I tighten it, because I don't want the string, the part of the string that's not really touching the nut most of the time, because it's kind of wrapped up around the top. I don't want that wearing out all my nice graphite powder, so I kind of keep it from wearing it away until I can't hold it up anymore. Once it's pretty tight, then I let it sit down in there. Get it about to the right pitch, and then I blow off the extra before I touch it and rub it in. So the graphite powder does have one drawback. It is a powder, which again blows away, but it also is kind of this silver sparkly kind of look, and it will kind of sit on the mandolin or the fingerboard too, and it can kind of just stay there unless you actually wipe it off. But once you have all the strings in place, it's hard to wipe some spots. So sometimes it can kind of sit on the mandolin and look a little sparkly, a little bad. It doesn't bug me personally. If it really does bug you, just use a pencil. It's pretty much just as good. I'm going to loosen the G string I already did put on, so I can lubricate underneath it. Just enough to lift it up out of the slots. And then I'm going to kind of hover it over the nut while I tighten it back up. And hover it as long as I can so I don't grind it all out, pulling the string across it. That's about it. close enough. At this point, you're going to put a lot more strings and pressure on everything, so don't worry about it. I wipe off the graphite powder as I go, just so I don't have too many extra sparklies around. Since I have the other E string out, I'll put that one on now too. Normal string order, when you put them back on, the best way to do it is whichever string uses the lower peg, do that first and then work your way up. Otherwise, you're trying to feed a string past like all these other strings that are already sitting in place, and it just makes it harder. So work from the bottom peg up, whether you're on your treble side or on your bass side. So again, the tricky part, put the loop over, get 3 fingers of tension or of slack, hold it in place with my thumb so that this side can be loose. I'm gonna feed it from inside to outside. Gonna pull it tight, wrap it up over the top, around the post, keep going around the post until I get to the other string. I'm gonna go underneath it, or not the other string, but the same string, slack part. Get it unstuck from everything else here. There we go. Wrap it around and kind of pull it up. Make an L there. And that should be about right so it doesn't fall off the tailpiece. Now I'm going to tighten it up. You can use the peg winder too, so you don't spend extra time. Oops, make sure that the string feeds kind of from the middle of the post where the hole is toward the bottom of the post, just so everything stays nice and neat. Okay, make sure the string is not in the actual slot it goes, because I need to put the lubricant in. I'm going to use a pencil or the powder. There we go. There we go. Okay, I'll set that side, and that side doesn't really slide through the groove nearly as much because the tuner's not down here. Up here I'm like pulling it through the nut. So again, I'll hover it over where I want to be until I can't hover it anymore. Again, the treble side pegs to make the string tighter roll toward the bridge. And I do not have a mnemonic for that, sorry. That's just how it goes. Okay. I don't point E strings toward my face when I'm tuning, because sometimes they do break. Hate this part. Before I go all the way, let me make sure it's in the right slot. That's in the right slot. That's in the right slot. Okay. I hate this. All right, that's there. Pull off the powder. Wipe it off too. Sometimes the little bit of polish residue makes the graphite find other places to try to stick. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to undo the E string that was already there so I can lubricate underneath it. Lubrication is really, really important to a mandolin string change. Mandolins you spend half of your life tuning, and then your other half of your life playing out of tune anyway. Don't make it harder by having your strings sticking in your nut and your bridge while you're tuning. What that does is just basically make you think you've got it in tune because you've twisted the knob to make it the right way, and then as soon as you rake across the strings with your pick or smash it down with your finger, you release the slack that has built up around that sticky nut or the sticky bridge, and all of a sudden you're out of tune again. So don't do that. A lot of this is just muscle memory stuff. You will get better as you go, don't worry. There we go, close enough. We will spend hours tuning it perfectly later. All right, I'm going to push the ends of the string just kind of off to the side we'll cut them off at the very end. Just kind of want them out of the way for the next couple strings. Doesn't matter which I'll do. Since I picked it up, I'll do second string, which again, count from highest to lowest. So 1, 2, this is the A string, not the E string. Unwrap the bass, unwrap the loose ends, boing. Again, since these are these straight up strings, this is set as labeled medium gauge, but just due to how they do their string gauges, this ends up being the gauge that a lot of other places call like a medium heavy or a heavy gauge. So these A strings especially are pretty stiff feeling. Oops. Wrap around. Pass it under. There we go. And then I'll just tighten it up a little bit here to get it pretty close to a reasonable tension. Make sure it goes underneath. Oof, tightened it too much. Got myself in trouble. Loosen it back out. Pull it from around the back of the nut. There we go. Now it's on top. Now I'll tighten it back up. Making sure that it's feeding from the hole down toward the face of the headstock. Okay, somewhat close. I have this string in the slot next to where it should actually be right now, so that I can put the lubrication in the slot it should be in. One advantage of using the pencil is since you are kind of drawing with the tip of the pencil through the groove, it can clean out any residue that may have built up, any stickiness or crud. So in some ways the pencil can be better than the powder, especially if it's been a while since you cleaned it out. Okay, where's my A note? I think it's about, not sure. Yeah, it's a little flat. There it is, pretty close. As much as we tried to be careful wrapping the string around the post nice and evenly, there's always going to be a bit of slack. So as I grab the end that I pulled straight up, if I pull it straight up again, you can hear the string go flat. Oh, there we go. And that's just kind of other slack working its way out and the winding getting tighter and tighter around the peg. Something like that. All right, let's do it again. Try not to push the tip of the string down into the face of your headstock. If you lift it too high and kind of point it down, you'll jab the string into the wood, and those scratches don't come out. Been doing this for 20-something years now, so if you look at the hand motions and go, oh, that looks like he has a special trick or something like that, it's not a special trick, it's just muscle memory. Bass. Bridge side in, make sure it's in the slot. Tune it up. Hover it over the gap while I tighten it. There we go. Add it. That's it. Again, I'm trying not to face the strings as I get up to initial pitch, in case they fail, which does occasionally happen. String failure while you're tuning can also happen because your bridge or your nut has a rough spot around the corner. That's something that you should have a professional look at. You can really mess up how your instrument plays if you try to file that out yourself and you take a bit too much off or something like that. All right, bend the strands off to the sides, and then we'll get the last string, third string. Boing. Okay, again working from the bottom tuner to the top tuner. Okay, again, so 3 fingers of slack, holding it in place with my thumb, inside to outside. So in this case, I'll be pulling the slack out this way. There we go. Lift the string straight up, or sorry, yeah, basically up. Go around the top of the peg, keep going around the other side of the peg, keep going around, and then get to the other piece of the string. I'll go under it, make sure that I've wrapped the loose end around the top. Sometimes it kind of pops out, so make sure it's around the top. Keep going around, basically until you kind of get back to start, where it's facing from in to out again, and then we'll kind of hold everything in place and lift it straight up to kind of bend like an L kind of across the string. Oops, bottom loop came out. Feed that back in place. I'll hold that for a second while I give it the first couple cranks of tuning. Now it should stay in place. Now it's better to hold this up just to keep things tight as you tune, rather than holding this part down in place. Okay, give it a few twists here as it's getting close. Don't want it too tight, so I can shift it to the other slot and make sure that the slot is open so I can put the lubricant in. Ooh, a little much. A little much there too. Sometimes I kind of set the string through the powder into the gap and kind of lift it back out and kind of like try to smush it in to that to the groove a little bit more, just so there's as much graphite in there as I can kind of manage. A little bit of corrosion in the middle of that string already. Sometimes that happens. String. Over the top, keep going all the way around, bend it up into an L, and start tightening it up. Again, as you're tightening, make sure the string is not around. Make sure the string is not around like the other side of the tuning pegs, or around, like right now it's off the side of the nut because there's so much slack. But as you tune it, it can get stuck back there. Make sure you bring it up to the top before it's too tight. Okay, starting to feel some tension there. Okay, that's pretty close. Pull it out of the slot. Get some graphite in there. Okay. Set it into the slot. Get this one. Yeah, smush it in and out here. Oof. There you go. Okay, now, wonderful sound. We'll do just a real quick tune here. lot better. All right. So a couple last housekeeping items, or a few last actually. First of all, let's put the pieces of felt back where they should go. Before I forget, clean off any extra graphite powder. Again, the powder is a bit messier. I think it works slightly better. It's a personal preference thing. Pencil is easier, and it'll probably be less of a hassle and give you 95% of the results. So I'd probably just recommend doing that one. I'm going to feed my felt back through here and kind of use the pick to kind of help feed it into the strings. Okay, just deadens it just a teeny amount. Probably need a new piece so that actually pushes up against those strings a little more. And then I will make sure I put the felt piece back underneath the tailpiece. So right now, that's a lot of ringing. If I put the felt in there, and close it up, it's a lot better. Some people use a little rubber grommets that they jam between each pair of strings. Those are fine. I don't have any issue with those, but I haven't used them yet, and they just seem like a little bit more of a hassle than just using the felt. Just a little more old school. Ouch. Okay. So before I poke my eyes out, let's cut these string ends off. These pliers that I have needle nose, and they also have string cutters in the back. I had these forever. I don't know where I got them, so don't ask. But I'm going to basically just pull the string end a little tight. Can get out any extra slack. And pull them all tight first, just to do things in a process. And just pulling them straight up. Oops. Again, you want all the slack out that you can manage. Don't get too crazy about it, but you don't want extra slack of the winding kind of vibrating or anything weird. And then I like to cut the strings as close to the peg as I possibly can so that I poke myself less. I'm just going to nip off all the extra string ends here. Some people leave a little more room. I find it just snags on stuff. And leave a little more room. They leave a little bit extra pokey stuff hanging over the end of the tuning peg. Yeah, so here's where sometimes if you cut those wound strings, you'll get a loop of that winding brass or bronze that comes off and kind of looks like a piece of dust, but it's actually a piece of wire, little thin wire that can scratch up if you just kind of rub it into your mandolin too badly. Yeah, there's actually a couple here I can show you. Show you what those look like. So, yeah, you can see on both sides of this peg here, there's a couple pieces of shininess that's actually winding that came off when I cut the string ends off. So if I just blow that off, they're all gone, and that's better than rubbing them off with a cloth and scratching up your headstock. All right, I think last piece of kind of housekeeping that I do. So these tuners that I have little screws on the end. A lot don't, but these do, and they're not terribly uncommon. One of the last things I tend to do if I have lots of extra time like I do today is I'll take a flathead screwdriver and I'll just gently make sure that all those screws haven't come loose. Sometimes in the process of tuning or detuning the mandolin, oops, especially by hand, those screws will tend to kind of work themselves a little bit loose, and you'll end up fighting this buzzing for a long time. So I just kind of don't go real tight. You don't want to shatter anything, but you should take all the slack out of them. There we go. and I'm maybe turning like half of these, like an eighth of a turn or something like that. Most of them are still pretty tight, so it's not a huge issue. Sometimes I'll go around the screws of the back of the tuners too and just make sure nothing's like working its way loose. Sometimes the vibrations just kind of let it come out there. Alright, so I've tightened up all the screws around the tuners, and I took a little time to actually tune the instrument and a little break here. A lot closer. Couple last little things to do. One, put the Tone-Gard back on. So basically just try to make it look straight so it's not too rotated here. There's one little spring here. You kind of have, that's the, there's a few springs, but this is the biggest one to kind of get into place. So I put usually that one down along the middle first, approximately. It's a little off to the side. And then grab these other 2 feet. Kind of pull them both up at the same time around the edge. Again, make sure that you don't touch metal to wood. Make sure the little plastic tubies stay on their feet the right way. Make sure that everything is pushed up flush against the back of the mandolin again. And then I could put the strap on. I won't put the strap back on right now. So yeah, so then kind of check, make sure that the intonation is the right way here. So that's pretty close, so I'll play a G chord. Even if the bridge were pretty far off, you wouldn't notice much intonation difference on the lower frets. What you'll notice is on the higher frets. So I'll play this. Pretty close. It's pretty close. That's in tune, I think. That sounds in tune to me up there, so let's check the bass side. Something's a little off tune. Something's buzzing. I'll figure that out later. That note always ends up a little sharp, even if I have the bridge in the right place on the D string. Usually that's why I check the G string. It's pretty close. Depending on the compensation of your bridge, like if you look at the bridge itself, there's always these little like stair steps. Depending on how that's built in and the exact like gauge of your strings and how high the bridge is up, the intonation will shift around, especially on the middle strings. So get the G string and the E string as close as you can, and that's about as good as you'll be able to get for the common person. There's probably advanced techniques to go around that, but that'll get you 95% of the way there. But that sounds pretty good to me. So thanks for watching. That was the super long version of the string change. And normally I can do a just strings change without adjusting the bridge in like something like 30 minutes or something like that. But sometimes doing all the polishing and the tightening and the bridge adjustments too can be a nice thing. So hopefully you found a helpful section of this. If you watched the whole thing, more power to you. Wow. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.